Well, the Western Conference Final is officially underway. Game 1 in the books, and it was a bit of a doozy. The Hockey News Playoff Frenzy live, presented by Sticks.com. Katie Gauze joined by both Michaels, Michael Tracos and Michael Agello. And guys, this game through 40 minutes was all things Edmonton Oilers, but we had 5 unanswered goals by Dallas in the third period, thanks in part to some very important power play opportunities. And Dallas wins 6-3, the final score, to take a 1-0 lead in the series. Michael Tracos, let's start with you. What did you see maybe was kind of the first 40 minutes and what this game looked like in terms of Edmonton being in control versus whatever the heck happened in that final 20? Was it more Edmonton? Was it more Dallas? Kind of break down these two different games that we just witnessed.
Yeah, first things first, if this is what we're going to get, Katie, for the rest of the series, like inject this series in my veins because we are in for a hell of a series. Like offense all night, the Stars showed up and, the Stars showed up, I guess, in the third period. What can I say? It doesn't look like if anyone was just looking at the box score and you see 6-3 for Dallas, you'd think, wow, what a one-sided just pummeling they put on the Edmonton Oilers. And while that might be true for the third period, this was a lot closer than the score sheet would lead you to believe. So, if I'm Edmonton, I'm not feeling that bad. I guess we're going to talk about it later on. But Stuart Skinner, I guess that's going to be the $1 million question: is do you put him back in for game 2?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Michael, what did you kind of make of these two games? Maybe we'll leave the goaltending discussion for a moment, but just from a performance standpoint from both teams.
The Stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Well, it was a tale of two games because I thought the Stars in the first half and probably most of the first 40 minutes looked like they were skating in quicksand, and the Oilers were blowing by them, and they had the physical advantage. Zach Hyman had a dozen hits in the game, and then that penalty at the end of the second period, and that carried over to the third. The Heiskanen goal, like right off the bat, and then you got that sinking feeling that and then within the span of 3 goals in 5 minutes and 26 seconds. There you go. And then the 3-1 lead is evaporated. Now it's 4-3, and now you're chasing the game. So, full marks to Dallas because, they blew by the Oilers in the third period.
Yeah, through the first 40 minutes, I even took the note down that it just felt like the ice was even a little bit tilted, right? There was so much control and good puck possession from Edmonton. It really felt like they had control of the game. You were seeing their superstars, McDavid and Draisaitl, both having good performances. I wrote down after the second period, Mikko Rantanen a little quiet, though he did only end up with 1 assist. Certainly he was out there and generating a lot of those chances and was a part of that big third period for quite a bit of it. So let's talk about this, because heading into this series, a big conversation is the depth of Edmonton and if it can continue versus the depth of Dallas needing to step up, needing to kind of find their game. Do we feel like tonight, it's a small sample size, this is just one game, but do we feel like maybe we started to see the beginnings of the Stars' depth waking up, because we had first goals of the series from Lindell, from Duchesne, starting to get some points generated from those guys that haven't been as crucial? What did you kind of make of that?
It's tough to say because Connor Brown had a glorious chance on the back end where it just goes over the post. Trent Frederick fans on a shot right in front of the net. Like 2 of those plays could have easily been goals, and maybe we're talking about Edmonton's depth. So, you're right, Katie. Dallas, their depth players showed up, and this is Dallas's strength, and it's been their strength all season long. Is this isn't a one-line team. It's not even a 2-line team. This is really a 3 to 4 line team. And we saw elements of it tonight when you mentioned Rantanen was kind of quiet by his standards. And yet, you don't really need him on a night like tonight. On the other end, I thought McDavid, like you said, put together such a fabulous performance. I'm surprised that he didn't have like 6 or 7 points because he was flying all night. Again, if I'm an Edmonton fan, I'm less worried about this game than normal, maybe. I'm happy with Edmonton's performance. It's just that third period really killed you, and really it's the PK that kind of killed you. Like Dallas's power play capitalized every time they needed to.
And it's been good throughout the playoffs. So this was not something that was like a surprise. And it is something that teams, were aware of, wanting to keep them out of the box. Edmonton learned a hard lesson. Michael, I want to ask you, because this was kind of a crucial moment. And I saw a little bit of chatter about this online. But for Michael Agello, there was some talk about Duchesne selling that high stick, little bit of the extra whip in the head. At the same time, it's hard for me to imagine that any player in this position in the playoffs isn't going to probably do the same thing.
Oh, no. I mean, of course they're not going to fake anything and throw their head back. And, my goodness. I mean, first of all, the rule.
Is that sarcasm there, Mike?
Yeah. Oh, no.
Okay.
No. Yeah. No, the rule is in terms of depth, if you have too many ex-Toronto Maple Leafs, you lose that. And the Edmonton Oilers have the market cornered on ex-Maple Leafs. But seriously, I thought the advantage that the Stars had in this series was their depth. When you have a guy like Sam Steele who scored the dagger goal in the third period, I think he mixes between third and fourth lines. Then they shook up their lines because they weren't very effective in the first two periods. But that's a guy who's a depth player, and he's been a key cog for the Stars. So I think the depth and having like Sagan and Ben on your third line when they used to be frontliners, that is a big advantage for the Stars. And I think, I think the Stars are winning this series. And I predicted it before, but I think tonight you saw that depth really at work against the Oilers.
So again, a big question, of course, after a game like this was Stuart Skinner a major issue? Was this, something that he was really supposed to be held responsible for? Was this more, you look at some of those goals on the PK. It's hard to imagine that he was really seeing the puck very well. I guess maybe how much of this is, to blame on Skinner's part versus just the support that he was getting in that third period. What do you guys think?
I think we got to stop thinking of Stuart Skinner as like a legit number one goalie who can't be yanked from games. And I don't mean that in like a disparaging way. I just mean it like Edmonton has two goalies now. I think they're as comfortable with Pickard in net as they are with Skinner. I don't think they have a problem if they had to go to Pickard for game two and then possibly back to Skinner later in the series, like we saw it in previous rounds now. So I don't blame him totally for the 5 goals that he allowed. I didn't see really like a true soft goal. At the same time, what's the harm in going to Pickard at this point?
I guess.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Michael.
I was saying if Pickard is available, because Oliver Rodriguez backed him up today, and I know.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Well, no, I know that he may be available later in the series, but they're not going to go with Rodriguez. They're sort of stuck with Skinner, and I don't think he had a bad game, but in a game where it's all flow and you're up 3-1 and you feel the Stars coming on, you need a save, and they didn't get a save. And I think that's the problem here. He's not a number one. Nobody ever thought, the shortcoming of the Edmonton Oilers is that the deadline, there was talk about them trading for John Gibson or a couple other goaltenders. And like, they're the Carolina of the West. They don't believe in trading for number one goalies. Well, maybe you should reconsider that, because if they fall short in this series, the lack of goaltending will be a big part of it.
Is there a goalie, though, that Edmonton could have got that would match up against Jake Ottinger? Because let's be real, this guy was just fantastic. I know he only faced, 28 shots, but those were really good 28 shots.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think he was particularly strong on I think it was the second goal, but he had a pretty decent game, and unlike. And I think I said it in the comments before the show, Ottinger's numbers against Edmonton last year and career-wise are not great. It seems to be a team, like Henrik Lundqvist always stunk against Toronto for some reason. I don't know why. And he's a Hall of Fame goaltender. I don't know if Ottinger's a Hall of Fame goalie, but there are just some teams you don't match up well with. And career-wise, he hasn't. But tonight, I think he was strong.
Yeah, I was on NHL Network Radio earlier today and was talking, and Marty Baron spoke specifically about kind of his impression of Cal Pickard and the injury that he suffered. He's sort of under the impression he thinks it really could be a little more serious than maybe people think, something with the knee. He didn't love the way it looked. And I just feel like, goalies just know more about the way goalies react to injuries, right? I mean, he was spot on with his impersonation or his impressions of what happened with Sam Montembeault back when he went down with that injury. So it's kind of just like this goalie sense that I feel like guys just kind of know, like, I remember doing that and this is exactly how it felt and this is exactly how I reacted and this is exactly what was wrong with me. So, whether they were happy with Skinner tonight or not, it does feel like he's going to be back in the net for game 2. And again, I don't necessarily think he was the overall issue. But again, it's certainly easy, in situations like this when there feels like a collapse in a short amount of time to put it all on the goaltender. Talk to me a little bit, guys, just about, McDavid and Draisaitl. I mean, they were excellent tonight. We've seen them skating, but in terms of, the level that they're at in terms of the scoring, maybe specifically for McDavid, there's been a lot of discussion about how, he kind of does still need to find another level if they're going to continue, if they're going to be able to win a Stanley Cup. Again, not saying he hasn't been good, but for his standards, especially from a scoring standpoint, it feels like maybe there is more for him to give.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, like, the guy finishes with 2 assists. He's got 4 shots tonight, flying up and down the ice, and you're still going, yeah, but, I've seen better.
High standards.
It's true. I'm 100% with you, Katie. There is another level because, what does he have? Does he only have 3 goals this playoffs?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not enough for Connor McDavid.
Right.
That being said, he easily could have had a highlight reel goal early on. Ottinger did make a great save on him, where McDavid was doing McDavid-like things and just skating up the ice. So, he's going to be a handful. I can't imagine that he's going to be held off, the score sheet when it comes to goals for the entire series. But, if you're the Edmonton Oilers, again, you kind of have to be happy. Like, your best players did show up tonight, whether it was Bouchard, whether it was Draisaitl, whether it was McDavid, heck, even Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I thought that was, is that the goal that you didn't think that was that great on Ottinger, the one that Nuge scored, or was it the Bouchard one?
It was the Nugent Hopkins one. I mean, it deflected off Oscar back, but when he got it in the slot, I thought Ottinger was not in the good position. I mean, I
think what I saw in that one was Ottinger going, oh boy, 97 still on the ice. I better keep one eye on him and then one eye on the guy who's got the puck. So I think that's the other thing with McDavid is he just draws so many people to him. Whether you're defending him or not, you just kind of always have one eye on him and just kind of have to know what he's doing. And I think that does open a lot of space up for other guys.
Well, McDavid's the kind of guy, Katie, that he was pissed off after they won 1-0 in overtime against Vegas. I mean, he's
playing with a little bit of like what they used to say, like a burr in his saddle, like the old timers used to say.
Yes.
Maybe he thinks that's the difference between losing in 7 games to Florida and actually winning. I mean, I think the thing that is a miscalculation that Chris Knobloch does, and sometimes he has to do it out of desperation. He puts Draisaitl and McDavid together. And when you do that, it's a tough matchup. But the thing is, if you can control that, what's left? Really, I think it benefits them to have McDavid on one line, centering one line, and have Draisaitl on another line, playing with Podkolzin or whoever. It diversifies your offense. It gives you 2 lines that you have to really match up against. And they don't seem, when they're desperate, they put those 2 guys together. And I know they're 2 of the best players in the world. But again, if you limit them, then you really don't have much else that is going to really threaten you unless you make a mistake. And I think that's something that Knobloch has got to get off of and keep those guys separate unless it's on the power play.
Yeah, and I mean, we did see a fair amount of coaching in this game because there was points throughout the second period where Dallas was kind of putting some of their lines in a blender. Felt like Peter DeBoer was scrambling a little bit to just try to generate something, to find some kind of a spark within his offense. Even heading into this game, we had seen the lines kind of switched up between 3rd and 4th line, maybe trying to get Robertson going a little bit. He gets an assist tonight. It's funny because watching Peter DeBoer throughout a game is fascinating because they're down 2-0 and they show him on the bench. And then they're winning 6-3 and they show him on the bench. The man's face did not change. And I guess that's exactly what you want from a coach, right? Just calm, cool, collected, really not wavering no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly nobody who's done it more at this point. Feels like he's just like the OG when it comes to stressful playoff games and stressful playoff situations. But I mean, we've seen this matchup before. I guess, what is it going to take in your minds now that we've gotten this first game as, a little bit of a sample to see how is Dallas going to change what happened last year?
Yeah, that's the big question because, they need to they need to slay the dragon that is the Edmonton Oilers. And I guess the easiest way to do that is just have Ottinger, continue to make the big saves and, wait for your offense to click in, and hopefully it doesn't happen in the third period of every game. But the one thing that I'll say, Edmonton's depth was putting pressure. They just couldn't finish the job. And, like I mentioned earlier, like Connor Brown had a chance, in front. Evander Kane took a puck that was probably destined for the top corner, took it off his wrist. Mm-hmm. Same thing happened to Zach Hyman, where he takes the point shot off the top of the knee, which just looked so painful. I wonder how many ice bags he's going to be needing tonight. But, they were right there. The Edmonton Oilers were basically a goal away from tying it. And then Sam Steele, goes around a defender and the puck goes off of Tyler Seguin's stick. And just like that, it's Dallas just ran away with it. But, let's not kid ourselves. This was a game that could have easily have gone to overtime. And I think that's probably going to be in the back of Dallas's mind is, they cannot just give away the first period and, wait until the end of the game to kind of do their damage.
Yeah, this is a game that Edmonton, tonight when they're in their hotel room in Dallas, they're saying we let that one slip away because we had a lead. Yep. If they kill off that power play, there's no momentum for the Stars, but the Stars get that goal and then everything rolls downhill. And I have to say, the most encouraging thing for the Stars is that Miro Heiskanen looked like Miro Heiskanen.
Yeah.
He, I know he scored the goal early in the third period, but I thought, especially on that McDavid play that Michael was referring to, McDavid blew by Thomas Harley like he was standing still, and Heiskanen came over from his right defense position and cut him off to not allow him to go to the front of the net. So I don't know if he's 100% or anything close to 100%, but he played really well tonight.
Well, a reminder, the Playoff Frenzy Live is presented by Sticks.com. Don't break the bank on sticks. You can get a pro-level composite stick without the pro-level price tag at Sticks.com, Stix.com. Check it out. All right, well, heading into this series, there was a lot of discussion about the impressive 5-on-5 play that we saw from Edmonton. Obviously, we saw how important the special teams were in tonight's game, particularly for Dallas getting the win. But how important overall do you think special teams will be? And I guess maybe what lessons were very quickly learned by the Oilers in terms of how seriously to take the Dallas power play?
Edmonton really needs Matthias Ekholm right now. When is this guy going to get back in the lineup? Because, we're talking about the PK. He's a guy that's going to be, front and center on your penalty kill unit. Obviously Stuart Skinner needs to make some saves, but, how much do you blame a goaltender for power play goals or penalty shorthanded goals? And I tend to not blame the goalie just because that puck is whipping around from, left to right. And, the goalie basically has zero shot of making saves in most cases. So, I think, I don't know what Ekholm's status is right now. Are they saying that he could possibly be in for game 2?
Game 3, maybe. Like when they go back to Edmonton, when we start.
Okay, so he can't get into the lineup soon enough. I think after seeing the PK tonight, maybe Chris Knobloch is saying, all right, really? Do we have to wait one more game? Can you maybe come back in one game early?
Yeah, I think Edmonton needs Bob Gainey and Patrice Bergeron to add to their penalty killing core, because going into this game, their penalty killing was at 66.7%. It was the second or third worst in the NHL in the playoffs, and now they give up 3 power play goals on 4 opportunities. That's obscene. That's killer. That kills your chances, because they're going to play on the edge. Perry and Kane and Darnell Nurse are going to take stupid penalties, and it's going to give Dallas a power play. And if they do that, Dallas is going to bury it. So they have to, with their penalty killing in the state that it's in right now, they're going to have to calm down things. And I don't know if Corey Perry and Evander Kane can calm down things. They just run wild most of the time.
Producer Sam with the great stats, as always. Oilers' first time allowing 3 power plays in a period of a playoff game since Game 2 of 1992, taking it back to the year of Katie Gauze and the birth of your host here tonight. So it's been a minute since they let that happen. So
Katie,
certainly
you
not
cannot say this on.
You want to do. What? You guys were like, what, 89s?
I was 25 years old that year.
Go with 89. Let's go with that.
I like that. I heard an interesting stat during the broadcast that I want to bring up, and I want to talk about it in the context of both of our series. So it says this playoffs, 75% of the teams that win Game 1 have been going on to win this series. After seeing this game versus the game between Florida and Carolina, so we've got Dallas winning and obviously Florida winning. Does it feel like that stat is going to carry true across both series, or does it feel like it's probably a little bit more favored in Florida's sense than it is between this series with Oilers and Stars? Because I feel like this one is still very much up in the air. Like going into Game 2, I feel like Carolina is in a must-win situation because they're facing this Panthers team, and I know they're at home. Like they've been dominating at home. Do you really go down 2-0 and think you're going to beat the Panthers? I'm not sure. Versus Edmonton, even if they were to go down 2-0, I'm not as worried about them. What do you guys think?
I'm 100% with you. That Florida team is just a juggernaut, and that was a blowout, or as close to a blowout as I've seen. It wasn't a Florida-Toronto level blowout, but a 5-2 win was very decisive. This one again, it didn't feel like a 6-3 win, maybe because there was an empty netter there, and a lot of the goals just happened at the end. But I think I hope this one goes the distance, just because I started off saying what a series we're in for. And I saw one of the comments like, you guys are kidding yourselves, Dallas Stars in 4. I hope not. I really hope that we're treated to more than just 4 games of this.
Well, if we get to Game 7, we know Peter DeBoer is unbeaten in Game 7. So,
yeah.
I think this series is going to be a close series, and I agree with Michael. I think Florida is going to roll over the Carolina Hurricanes like a Sherman tank. What they did in that first game, and we were talking about it last night, Katie, is Carolina came out in that first period and tried to out-muscle Florida. They were physical. They figured, okay, they just got off Game 7 against Toronto. Well, don't worry, they rested the second half of the game. They didn't have to because they were up 6-1. But and then Carolina went too far, took a stupid penalty. Florida got the power play goal, and they were off and running. And the worst thing that happened was that Shane Gostisbehere shoots the puck at Brad Marchand. Now he's public enemy number 1 on the Florida Panthers. They will relentlessly go after that guy every shift for the rest of the series. That's the way the Florida Panthers play.
Also, keep in mind, Edmonton hadn't played since, are we going back to May 14th? Like that is a long period to be off. And, again, for a team that was rested, I didn't see a whole lot of rust in the first period, but maybe that kind of caught up to them in the third. Maybe the legs started to get a little, maybe not atrophied, but some lactic acid was building up there.
I mean, if nothing else, we've seen the time off seems to always have the biggest effect on a goaltender. And again, we've talked about Stuart Skinner plenty in this show, but similar to what happened with Freddie Anderson, it definitely felt like it wasn't the sharpest game. And obviously Skinner was coming in off of shutouts. So, whether those were all necessarily his doing versus the support he got remains to be seen. But again, the rest versus rust debate, certainly a little bit different the way it played out between these two series. All right, before we kind of look ahead to tomorrow and Game 2 between Florida and Carolina, I want to talk about a little news that came out today with the reports that the Leafs granted permission for the Islanders to speak to President Brendan Shanahan. And is this like the perfect way for Toronto to get rid of him without even having to get rid of him? Because he got a different job, good for him. We wish him all the best, and we don't actually have to be the heavies in this situation. What did you think of, the permission being granted, and what do you think about the Isles' interest in him?
Yeah, for a team that really has been just the model of failure, Katie. It's amazing how many players, coaches, execs, managers get snatched up by every other team after they leave Toronto. Like we saw Sheldon Keefe going to Jersey. Obviously now Brendan Shanahan following Lou Lamoriello's footsteps to Long Island. I'm not surprised, when you look at what Brendan Shanahan did, and when you think about Shanahan and the Leafs, it's all about the Shana plan. He was the first guy to convince the board of directors to not only lose, but lose big and try to get that number 1 overall pick. And, consecutive drafts there where he gets Nylander, then he gets Marner, then he gets Austin Matthews with the number 1 overall pick. Those are the pieces that you need to build a championship or to win a championship. And, as much as Shanahan's teams never were able to get over the hump, to get those 3 guys and to go forward with a plan and to end up with, on paper, what was just a all-star style of a lineup, I almost don't put the blame on Shanahan. I almost put it at the players at that point. I'm like, okay, well, what else do you need? He gave you everything, guys, including a lot of money. So I kind of feel sorry for Brendan Shanahan, and that's why I'm really not that surprised that another team would be looking at him going, yeah, do what you did in Toronto, and hopefully we'll be able to make it work here.
Yeah.
Maple Leaf fans are disappointed because they're building the gallows in Maple Leaf Square, but they're not going to get a chance to walk Brendan Shanahan to them. He's going to go to the Islanders. He'll be sitting in Lou Lamoriello's desk at the UBS Arena.
Is that on the floor, or does he get a chair, Mike?
They'll talk about it. They'll negotiate. But I think I put more of an onus on Shanahan in the sense that there was no recognition in Toronto after a number of defeats. The one that I point to is the Montreal loss in 2021, and then they followed up by losing to Tampa Bay. At a certain point, there needed to be recognition that the core 4 had to be broken up. And this was before no move clauses and contracts were expiring, and they didn't do it. They doubled down on it, and it was a mistake. And then I think Kyle Dubas recognized it in 2023 after they lost to Florida. And because he disagreed and because there was a power struggle, he's out. They bring Treliving in, and that's 5 weeks before Marner's no move clause kicks in. And that is the thing that is the saddest about this whole situation, is that you trade Mitch Marner, you can get a value for him like Rantanen traded to Carolina for Martin Necas and Drury. They're getting nothing other than cap space out of Mitch Marner. And talk about the most sweet revenge for the Islanders, Mr. Kratos, if Brendan Shanahan goes to New York and signs Mitch Marner for the reverse Tavares on July 1st. Wouldn't that be something?
It would be. Mike, 9 straight years of playoffs, okay? I think the Buffalo Sabres and their fans would take that, okay?
No, the Sabres are the minor league Leafs. They've missed the playoffs for 14 years. The Leafs get to the playoffs and then can't do anything when they're there.
It's that argument, though. Would you rather be a team that's always in the playoffs and doesn't get the cup, or would you rather be a team that maybe wins the cup one year and then doesn't get a playoff appearance for another decade? So, obviously you'd love to have both, but, Toronto fans have been spoiled these past 9 years, despite not getting into the promised land.
After 58 years, I think they'll take one and then say, "I'll see you in 2040."
See another 100 years.
That'll keep them cozy at night for at least a few years, at least a little while. All right. Well, speaking of a team that seems to be consistently in the playoffs but hasn't been able to go the distance, although they make it a little further than the Leafs do, they are making it to conference finals. But Carolina, not quite able to get over the hump with this Rod Brind'Amour hockey that does sort of feel like it maybe has its limits. What's an X factor in your minds for, game 2? And I'm not even thinking about the series as a whole, because like I said earlier, I think game 2 is a must-win situation. So you kind of have to take it one game at a time. What is going to be the biggest piece of the puzzle for Carolina to, start at least giving themselves a chance against this Florida machine?
Against Florida, you're talking about. You got
Right.
to beat the Panthers. Is that what we're asking? How do you beat the Florida Panthers? like I guess Frederick
Freddie Anderson has to be perfect. I mean,
yeah, it almost seems like, is this a trick question, Katie?
Like, I mean, you do feel like they have to play a perfect game. I mean, that's where it's at.
That's how you beat him. Food poisoning.
Yeah, you do what Svechnikov does and run Bobrovsky. That's step one. Yeah. Step two is you get Frederick Anderson to stand on his head and try to steal a game. I guess that really is it. If you can, get your goaltender to be better than their goalie, that might give you a chance. But, Florida is just such a good team, man. They're playing with so much confidence. And I feel like as every team is getting a little kind of battered and bruised, it feels like they're just kind of rounding into form. Like they're like, oh, I play better when I'm kind of bruised in. I'm hobbling around here.
Takes on the ownership of it, right?
And what Paul Maurice has been doing with them, and you saw it in Game 7 and you saw it in Game 1 against Carolina, he's activating their defense to jump into the attack. I mean, Nico Mikkola, this guy was not an offensive. Yeah, all of a sudden he's like Olli Jokinen. He's jumping into the play and he's dishing it to AJ Greer, and Seth Jones has the game of his life in Game 7. I mean, it's impressive because really, last year they had Montour and they had Ekman Larson. They had offensive guys on the blue line. These guys are not great offensive defensemen, but they're really contributing and they're putting their opposition on their heels. And that, I think right now Carolina is sort of discombobulated. And I think the thing that they're worried about is the Freddie Anderson that played in Game 1 is the playoff Freddie that we saw in blue and white for 5 years, and not the guy who was incredible in the first 2 rounds.
Quick bonus question. Was the Svechnikov tush into the head of Bobrovsky worse than the Bennett-Stolarz collision?
Ooh. I actually think the Bennett one was a bit of I don't think it was malicious. I think he was trying to, make it uncomfortable and get in his grill, so to speak. Yeah. But I don't think he was trying to send him to a hospital. The Svechnikov one, I think he was just like, "Oh, I'm hitting this guy."
He was totally trying to do it.
It was on purpose. But Sam Bennett was like, "Hey, my ex teammate, let me massage your head with my elbow." That's what it was. Like,
we all know how Michael Agello feels about that one.
Yeah, and I'll call you in the emergency room just to see if you're okay. That's great.
Hockey's tough. They're still friends. But yeah, I definitely agree. Svechnikov certainly knew exactly what he was doing. The Bennett one, we can argue the intent at least a little bit more. All right, guys, good stuff. Well, we have both of our conference finals are underway. Dallas with a 6-3 win over Edmonton to take a 1-0 lead in that series. We will be back at it with Florida and Carolina in Raleigh at 8 o'clock tomorrow night for Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Final. Again, the Playoff Frenzy live on the Hockey News, presented by Stix.com, has you covered every night after all the action. Make sure, as always, to join us, comment, follow along on social media. We've got you covered. But that does it for this show, guys. Good stuff. Thanks for tuning in. Lots of playoff hockey left, and it's only going to get more exciting from here. Thanks for watching the Playoff Frenzy live, and we will see you all next time.